She didn't lose interest without warning. She didn't wake up one morning and decide you no longer mattered. Her feelings didn't disappear overnight, and her heart didn't shut down suddenly. But to most men, it looks exactly like that. Because when a woman finally lets go, she doesn't announce it with dramatic words or loud exits. She lets go quietly, calmly, and emotionally. And that calmness is what makes it hurt the most. The truth is, women don't leave when they're angry. They leave when they're tired. Not tired in a physical sense, but emotionally exhausted from trying to fix something alone, from feeling unheard, unseen, or unappreciated while still standing right next to the man they love. The end of a relationship rarely starts when she walks out the door. It begins far earlier, in moments the man never realized were the beginning of goodbye. A woman rarely communicates her emotional breakdown in big, obvious, dramatic ways. She doesn't say, "I'm losing love," or "I'm one step away from giving up." Instead, she communicates through subtle emotional signals. The way her voice changes when she's disappointed. The way she goes quiet after conversations that never lead to understanding. The way her eyes stop lighting up when she looks at you. The way she becomes mentally distant while still being physically present. She tries to express her pain through conversations, hints, soft complaints, attempts at emotional connection. But most men do not hear these moments as emotional alarms. They hear them as nagging, overthinking, or drama. He tells himself everything is fine because they're not fighting, because life looks normal on the outside, because she's still there. Meanwhile, she is slowly breaking on the inside, feeling increasingly alone in a relationship she is still working desperately to save. Psychological research shows that women often exit emotionally long before they leave physically. Women process emotional pain internally for weeks or months, trying to solve the problem, trying to hold the relationship together, trying to communicate through the only language they know. Emotional expression and bond. She begins to disconnect when she feels like her voice no longer matters, when her emotional needs are met with defensiveness, when conversations start and end the same way every time, when she begins having the same arguments without change, when she realizes she is the only one fighting to make things better. She doesn't lose hope suddenly. She loses it slowly, layer by layer, every time she tries to reach out and the man doesn't truly receive the message. Men often miss this emotional decline because men and women evaluate the health of a relationship differently. Men tend to measure the relationship based on stability. We're not fighting much, everything seems normal. Women measure the relationship based on emotional connection. Do we still feel like a team? Do I feel heard? Do I feel chosen? Do we still grow together? So while the man thinks everything is stable, the woman is quietly realizing the relationship is falling apart. That imbalance is why a man often experiences the shock of breakup at the end, while the woman felt the breakup long before the final moment. When a woman starts to lose interest, the signs are subtle at first. She becomes a little quieter, a little less affectionate, a little less curious about your day, a little less emotionally expressive. She stops initiating conversations, stops planning moments together, stops investing the energy she once did. These shifts rarely come from a place of not caring. They come from caring too much for too long without getting anything back. Women don't pull away because they no longer feel. They pull away because continuing to feel is becoming painful. Caring becomes a source of emotional exhaustion instead of emotional fulfillment. When expressing love hurts more than staying silent, silence becomes her protection. The most painful phase is when she stops talking. Men often misunderstand this as things improving, fewer arguments, fewer emotional discussions, a calmer household. But in female emotional psychology, silence is not peace. Silence is resignation. When a woman stops complaining, it means her emotional system has hit its limit. She no longer believes communication will change anything. She isn't calmer because she is happier. She is calmer because she has stopped investing the emotional effort needed to fight for the relationship. This is the moment most men miss completely. They think the storm has passed. In reality, the storm already damaged the foundation, and she is now emotionally packing her bags. By the time a woman physically leaves, she has already done the emotional work of grieving, processing, letting go, and accepting the loss internally. Men feel the pain intensely at the end when she leaves. Women feel the pain intensely at the beginning, when they are still in the relationship hoping it can be saved. That is why the breakup feels sudden to the man, but inevitable to the woman. He begins to panic when he sees her affection drop, when her responses shorten, when her energy changes, when she stops initiating physical closeness. Suddenly he realizes she is no longer emotionally available. He starts fighting for what he thought he already had. He becomes present, expressive, attentive, but now she is drained. The attention that would have meant everything months earlier is arriving after her heart has already begun to close. A woman rarely leaves as a first reaction. Leaving is her last resort, the emotional self-defense mechanism she turns to when staying feels like self-betrayal. When she gives up, it is not impulsive. It is a quiet and painful acceptance that the man she loves either did not understand her or did not care enough to notice her fading. A woman doesn't leave because she stopped loving. She leaves because loving stopped being safe. The saddest part is that she often warned him in every way she knew how, with tears, with conversations, with changes in affection and tone, but those warnings went unseen. And when she finally realizes nothing will change, she makes the most difficult decision of all. She stops trying. And this is where the story usually becomes painfully invisible to the man, because when a woman begins losing interest, the process does not happen in a single moment. It does not explode in a dramatic argument or appear in a sudden emotional confession. Instead, it starts quietly, deep inside her emotional world, long before she ever speaks a word about it. Most men never see this beginning because nothing in the outside world looks different yet. She still talks, still smiles, still goes out with him, still replies, still shares life in subtle ways. But internally, something has shifted. A silent emotional disappointment has begun forming. A feeling that perhaps her needs are not being seen, understood, or valued the way she hoped. Women in Tier 1 countries are raised with a strong awareness of emotional expectations. They expect not just presence, but partnership. Not just a relationship, but a journey in which both people show up. So when she starts feeling unheard, unsupported, or simply alone in the emotional connection, the first crack appears. An emotional space where love still exists, but belief in the future begins to weaken. She does not rush to express this feeling because women rarely voice disappointment at the first sign of it. Instead, they try to understand it on their own. They try to observe patterns. They try to see whether it's just a temporary dip or a permanent shift in the relationship. Men often make the mistake of assuming that if something was serious, she would tell them immediately. But in reality, women begin disconnecting quietly and only speak up if they feel the emotional conversation will lead to change. If the woman has tried expressing herself in earlier moments and felt dismissed, misunderstood, or not taken seriously, she becomes even less motivated to verbalize her new concern. To her, silence becomes protection, not a punishment, not manipulation, but emotional self-preservation. She tries to calm herself by adjusting her expectations instead of confronting him openly. She tells herself, maybe this is how he is. Maybe I am asking for too much. Maybe it's better to accept and stop hoping. Without noticing it, she has taken the first step away from him, not physically, but emotionally. Over time, the emotional load becomes heavier because while she is lowering expectations, she is still giving. She still reaches out, tries to maintain connection, carries the emotional labor, initiates conversation, plans time together, senses distance before he does, and subconsciously tries to keep the relationship alive. But slowly she realizes she is doing most of the work. She feels herself stretching, bending, holding, investing more than she is receiving. And psychology has a simple truth. When effort feels one-sided, desire begins to fade. Men often associate attraction with chemistry, physical connection, and shared moments. But for most women, attraction is deeply tied to emotional safety and consistency. When she starts feeling that she cannot rely on him emotionally, something inside begins to shut down. She may not say it, she may not show it, she may not even be fully aware of it, But the process is already unfolding. Before fully withdrawing, she begins to test the connection. Not consciously, not as a game, but as a way to confirm her truth. She may become a little less responsive, take longer to reply, stop initiating conversations, give shorter emotional answers, or pull back subtly in her tone. She does not do this to punish him, but to observe one thing. If she slows down, will he step forward? If she stops carrying the relationship, will he notice? If she becomes quiet, will he become more present? These are emotional questions she is asking without speaking them aloud. If the man responds with warmth, awareness, and effort, the connection often heals. But many men do the opposite. They either continue the same level of engagement as before, unaware that anything has changed, or worse, they react with anxiety, frustration, or distance of their own. They ask fewer questions. They withdraw. They fear becoming clingy, so they become detached. Or they assume she is simply busy, moody, or difficult. To her, this confirms her growing belief that the relationship is emotionally unequal. As this happens, emotional intimacy, the foundation of female attraction, begins dying quietly. The man often doesn't notice at first because the physical relationship might still feel normal. She may still hug him, kiss him, or even be intimate, because women usually lose emotional intimacy before physical comfort disappears. Men often use physical connection as the primary indicator that the relationship is fine, but women do not. A woman can still touch you while no longer trusting you with her feelings. The signs of emotional decay appear in smaller, quieter ways. She stops sharing the details of her day. She stops telling him her fears, frustrations, or dreams. Her voice tone shifts from expressive to neutral. She listens more than she talks. She begins living separately inside the relationship, even while being physically there. Her attachment style changes next. Even secure, confident women can become withdrawn and self-protective when they stop believing emotional vulnerability will be met with care. She begins relying more on herself, mentally rehearsing what life might feel like if she walked away. She reduces investment not to hurt him, but to prevent being hurt herself. And this is when men start noticing. They feel the coldness, the distance, the lack of enthusiasm. They feel like something changed suddenly. But in reality, nothing is sudden. What feels instant to him is simply the first visible signal of a decision she has been processing silently for weeks, sometimes months. At this stage, women begin preparing their exit emotionally before ever taking physical steps. This is a key psychological difference between men and women. Many men end a relationship during the emotional climax, after a betrayal, a major argument, or a breaking point. Many women end the relationship after the emotional climax has passed and the hurt has settled into acceptance. She stops fighting. She stops trying to fix anything. She stops seeking deeper conversations. Silence replaces effort, not because she doesn't care anymore, but because she has accepted that caring isn't changing anything. And when a woman stops fighting, the relationship is already over for her. Men often mistake silence for peace, but silence is usually the sound of a woman emotionally letting go. And here lies the painful truth. A woman almost never leaves the moment she walks away. She leaves earlier, internally, while still present. When she finally says the words, "I think we need to take a break," or "I don't feel the same anymore," or "I can't do this," it is not the beginning of her emotional journey, it is the end. She has already processed the loss, grieved the connection, and adjusted to life without him in her mind. That is why she often looks stronger, calmer, and more composed after a breakup, because she has already lived through the emotional collapse privately long before the relationship ended publicly. The man, on the other hand, experiences everything at once. His emotional processing begins after her decision is final. He feels shock, confusion, heartbreak, regret, urgency, and fear in the same instant. She had months to detach. He gets one moment. And that is why, when a woman loses interest suddenly, it almost never happened suddenly at all. The relationship ended silently while the man still believed everything was fine. This is the point where most men begin searching for explanations, sometimes in frustration, sometimes in confusion, sometimes in guilt. They replay conversations, analyze small moments, try to remember what changed, and often arrive at the wrong conclusions. Many men assume she drifted away because of another man, because she became bored, or because she was never serious to begin with. But for most Tier 1 women, the loss of interest comes from something far simpler and far more human. She no longer felt emotionally safe, desired, or understood. And often without realizing it, men push women further away not through bad intentions, but through unawareness of emotional reality. Men are taught to fix problems. When something breaks, they tighten the bolt, replace the tool, solve the mess, and move forward. They are solution-driven. But relationships are not problems to be solved. They are feelings to be understood. When a woman expresses something emotional, hurt, disappointment, loneliness, she isn't always looking for a solution. She's looking for connection. She wants to feel heard before anything else. But many men unknowingly respond with logic, explanations, or defense. She says, "I feel like I'm the only one trying." And he replies, "But I text you every morning." She says, "I need more reassurance." And he answers, "I'm doing everything I can." To him, he is providing reasons to comfort her. To her, he is unintentionally proving that he cannot hear her emotional world. And every time she opens up and feels unseen, she closes a little more. Eventually, the dynamic becomes uneven. She speaks less because she believes the conversation won't change anything. He feels blindsided because nothing looks obviously broken. He assumes silence means peace, but for her, silence has become resignation. When a woman reaches this point, logic cannot save the connection, gifts cannot repair it, and sudden effort, often seen in panic after she pulls away, cannot immediately rebuild trust. In fact, last-minute effort can sometimes make matters worse. She interprets it as effort born from fear, rather than real understanding. What she needed was consistency long before the crisis, presence long before the detachment, curiosity long before the relationship began collapsing in silence. But here is the hopeful truth. Attraction can be rebuilt even after she loses interest, but not by chasing her, begging for another chance, trying to prove worth, or convincing her that he has changed. Those actions only reinforce the very imbalance that made her disconnect in the first place. The only path that works is internal, not external. Women reattract when they feel a shift in the man, not a performance for her approval. When she sees him improving not to win her back, but because he finally understands himself. When she notices he has learned to listen not only to her words, but to the feelings underneath. When he stands confident, calm, and grounded rather than needy, desperate, or afraid of losing her. Women can feel when a man's change is genuine. They can feel when he has grown, when he has matured emotionally, when he has become someone capable of meeting them in the emotional space they always long for. For Tier 1 women, emotional intelligence is not optional. It is attractive. Many modern women have careers, lives, independence, and their own stability. They do not need a man to rescue them, provide for them, or complete them. They want a man who understands himself deeply enough that he can hold space for emotional connection. A woman feels safe when she senses that she can express herself without being judged, analyzed, or dismissed. She feels drawn to a man who asks questions, who listens with attention, who tries to understand instead of trying to immediately fix. She feels desire for a man who leads not by control, but by clarity, self-respect, and empathy. In many broken relationships, the man is not bad and the woman is not irrational. They simply communicate in different emotional languages. Women communicate through feeling first. Men communicate through reasoning first. Women need to feel before they think. Men need to think before they feel. And when no one teaches men how to bridge this gap, good relationships collapse not because of lack of love, but because of lack of understanding. If men were raised to speak the emotional dialect of connection, countless relationships could be saved long before they ever reach the breakup conversation. The deepest lesson is simple. She didn't leave when she walked out. She left when she felt emotionally alone while still sitting beside someone. That is the kind of loneliness that breaks women. The absence of presence hurts more than the absence of attention. The feeling of speaking but not being heard is more painful than silence. When a woman loses interest, it is rarely because she stopped caring. It is because caring quietly began destroying her. And so she stopped for her own emotional survival. But men can break this cycle. They can grow into a version of themselves that no longer fears emotion, but understands it. They can become the kind of partner who leads with warmth, confidence, communication, and self-awareness. And when they do, they not only transform their relationships, they transform themselves. A woman cannot guide a man into emotional maturity. She can only invite him. The real transformation begins when he chooses to step into that growth on his own. If you're a man who has watched a woman pull away and you felt confused, helpless, or blindsided, understand this. You were never the only one hurting. She was hurting long before you realized something was wrong. But this is not a story of blame. It is a moment of awakening. Because if you learn the psychology behind her distance, you are not just learning how to understand women, you are learning how to understand yourself. And that is the foundation of every lasting relationship.